Hey, welcome to Drive-By Reviews, where today we have a much anticipated, much requested lens comparison between the EF-M 22mm native lens and the Sigma 16, ever so popular. Now these both have similar focal lengths, they're both fast prime lenses, but the question is, when it comes down to photo performance, video performance, vlogging use, low light performance, and more, which is the one that's gonna win out and become the one that you keep in your pack? Well, let's find out today, so stay tuned. Here we go. Now, the most noticeable difference between these two lenses is, of course, its size. You've got the Canon 22mm coming in at a length of 0.9 inches, flat pancake lens, and a 2.4 inch diameter. And of course, that brings it in at a low weight of 105 grams. Whereas the Sigma lens is 3.63 inches long in length, and it has a 2.84 inch diameter, which is also a little bit bigger. And it comes in at 4 times the weight at 405 grams. And this is something that Canon did extremely well. Their focus has always been, with their EF-M mount system, lenses and cameras, to be travel friendly, compact, lightweight. And this lens does that in spades. And this is something that people do pay a lot of attention to. If you're going to be travel conscientious with your camera pack, this is the lens to go with for sure. Now with that in mind, if you don't care about being lightweight, compact, well, this is where the Sigma lens starts to really win. For one thing, it's weather sealed and splash proof, but the Canon is not. Of course, this is a faster lens. The Sigma comes wide open at F1.4, whereas the Canon wide open is F2. There's a difference in focal length, 16mm versus 22mm, and so of course you're gonna have a bigger field of view on the Sigma lens. There's a 20.4 degree wider maximum angle of view on the Sigma lens compared to the Canon. The Sigma lens comes with a lens hood, and for some reason the Canon does not. Don't know what's up with that. The Canon 22 has 7 aperture blades, whereas the Sigma lens has 9 aperture blades that are rounded, and you're gonna see that show up in the bokeh especially. The one other thing I'd really like to point out on lens design though is the focus rings. Now I do like how both of these focus rings interact. However, what's interesting is when they interact with the Canon body, this is actually way more intricate in how it slowly changes focus, whereas the Sigma is really quickly changing focus, and I'll show you that close up on how little detail this has when manually focusing in comparison to the Canon lens interacting with the Canon body. In fact, let's start with that before we jump into photo comparisons. Here we go. All right, so here we have the 16mm lens, and I have it currently painting what's in focus, so you can see how fast things come in and out of focus when I turn the focus ring on the 16mm. And that's actually text, black on white, that you're seeing come in and out of focus, and this is pretty accurate. If I zoom in to manually focus without the painting, it's pretty much just like this. And because it's so sensitive, just light touches here really quickly take something in and out of focus. When you're trying to focus on a subject all the way in the distance, like say a fence in a landscape shot, or a sign where you're trying to really get the letters to pop, that's your area of focus. Well, this can be just a hair, just a touch, and it's too far, and then a touch back. And you're gonna see here as I switch to the Canon 22mm, that is not the case with that lens. So the Sigma is just far more sensitive in how the focus ring interacts compared to the Canon. All right, we have the 22mm now, and I'm gonna take the focal ring. You can't see it, so short. I'm gonna turn. Now the letters come into focus, slowly all the way, and slowly fading out. You see how subtle that is? That's extremely helpful. I mean, look, I am turning tremendous amounts compared to, remember the Sigma lens just turning like that would completely take the letters in and out, whereas here it's all pretty much in focus. It's just how much of it's in focus. I have the box tilted a little bit, so it's kind of fading in and out of focus throughout the tilt of the box. And the Canon is just so unbelievably meticulous, which is so helpful with manual focusing. And that's just a huge, huge difference that's gonna mean a lot more to photographers than videographers. So if you're gonna use these lenses for photos, it's gonna be a lot easier to manually focus with the 22mm in comparison to the Sigma 16. However, autofocusing works quite well with these lenses. And so if you're gonna autofocus, this isn't really something you're gonna care about as much. But just so you know, way more intricate autofocusing focus ring on the 22mm when it's interacting with the M6 Mark II in comparison to the Sigma. This, by the way, replicates exactly the same on the Canon M50. Now when it comes to vlogging, you're gonna notice the main considerations are gonna be the weight and size of the lens, as well as the field of view difference. Right here we have the 22mm, and you're gonna notice that the face tracking autofocus is gonna work phenomenally well on both of these lenses. It's face tracking right now. Even if I come all the way up into the lens, it's gonna be snappy and accurate. If I jump out, it's gonna go to the background pretty quickly. And if I come right back in, it's gonna go right back to me pretty quickly. So you're gonna notice between the two lenses, it's gonna be about the same on that performance. But check out this field of view difference when you go from the 22mm lens to the 16. And here's a 16. And as you can see, there's that field of view difference, right? Okay, it's a little bit heavier, but this gimbal can handle it just fine. This is the AK4000. And honestly, most gimbals aren't gonna have much trouble with just a 300-gram difference, but it's possible. It's also a little bit more finicky in getting it balanced. But beyond that, you can see it glides just the same. It's just as well. And the face tracking autofocus is just as good. Following my face, pretty snappy. Out it goes. In I go. And as you can see, it works just as well. So it really comes down to, do you mind the field of view difference from the 22mm, or do you want to pay the extra money for the Sigma 16? Let's check out a different vlogging style shot. Another style of vlog shot is this handheld selfie, and this is me holding it at my arm length with 22mm on the camera right now. And as you can see, this is enough field of view, even though it's tighter than the 16mm you're gonna see in a second, but this is perfectly usable. Now, neither of these lenses have image stabilization, but they're gonna work quite well for this style of vlog shot where you're trying to talk and walk and have the camera in this interesting position where you have the background moving and you pretty much stay in the frame. And as you can see, despite the change in light, you're gonna have the face tracking autofocus work just fine. You could also use a 1-point autofocus or even the large area autofocus, and it's not gonna have a problem at all keeping you in focus while you vlog shot with your own arm. As the tripod, now here's the 16mm, and it is significantly heavier. You're not gonna have as much endurance when it comes to holding it in your hand. But you can see the difference here. Okay, there's a difference in the field of view, and there's gonna be also a little bit of a difference in how it reacts to the lighting changes. But nonetheless, if you don't mind the change in look from the 22 to the 16, this is really gonna be more about how long can your arm hold out holding that extra 300 grams of weight on the 16mm lens. But if you really do like the look of the 16mm over the 22 or the 22 over the 16 when it comes to this style of shot, and this is your primary vlogging use, well, that's gonna kind of make or break this lens option choice for you already. Now, the other concern when it comes to vlogging is low light shots. So let's take a look at that. Low light vlog shots, one of my favorite shots to take with a beautiful lens like the Sigma 16. Now, you can see here, the autofocusing is gonna work phenomenally well. As always, the Sigma is extremely fast and accurate on its autofocusing, especially working with the M6 Mark II. But you're gonna see this subtle difference in the speed of the Sigma 16 and the field of view shift as we go from the Sigma to the Canon 22. Check this out. And there you see, here's the difference with the 22mm. A little bit tighter field of view, and of course, it's not quite as fast, so you're gonna see a difference there in the colors and how the low light looks with that little bit of difference in comparison to the Sigma. Now, some people like this tighter field of view and how it gives you a little bit different subject separation with less of a scene included. But personally, I kind of like having a little bit more freedom to move in and out and away from the actual lens position. It gives you a little bit more freedom on where you can place the camera and of course, how close you can get before it becomes an unusable shot. But here we go, just as accurate for the most part. You are gonna notice a slight difference in speed. Of course, Canon has some intention in making theirs a little bit more cinematic in the speed of autofocus, but it is a little more sluggish. So it kind of depends what you're looking for. I do know some fans of Sony that like that ultra fast autofocusing speed, and of course, they're the industry leader when it comes to speed, but there is such a thing as too fast if you're doing vlogging. But there you go, there's your low light apples to apples comparison. Okay, here we have a photo comparison between the Sigma 16mm on the left, wide open at f1.4, on the right, the Canon 22 wide open at f2, and we focused right here on the continued word on this front subject. Now, this is probably the clearest difference you're gonna see between the 9 rounded aperture blades on the Sigma here on the left. You can see how creamy and smooth the background is compared to the 7 aperture blades, not rounded, on the Canon. And you're just gonna see how it's not quite as smooth, not quite as creamy as on the Sigma. And that's gonna pretty much be true throughout, but this is just the most stark contrast as we're shooting wide open. This is as creamy and smooth as these lenses are gonna get. Now coming down to focus, you zoom right on in here and you're gonna see the Sigma is not as sharp here wide open as the Canon. And of course, it has a thinner depth of field, 1.4 versus the 2. So more is in focus overall on the Canon. And if we go to the edge, you're going to see a pretty stark contrast in what's sharp and in focus here as well. You can see it's a clear win for the Canon there, shooting wide open. True in both corners here. This is the Filtrox speed booster we looked at recently, right? It's another clear win there for the Canon. Now, if we move our focus back to the lens behind our front subjects, we're going to see, I'm focusing here on the Canon Word, on the Canon 11-22, only native lens with image stabilization in the lens. And you're going to see still the Canon is, of course, beating the Sigma here wide open in focus, in clarity, sharpness. On the edge, something to keep in mind is both these lenses have some distortion. If we back out here and go back to that first photo, by the way, you're going to see the barrel distortion difference just in the counter edge here. Much more significantly pronounced in the wider angle Sigma 16 compared to the Canon 22. And then we're going to focus on that Sigma box in the back. And still a win for the Canon. And you can again see that difference in depth of field here with that hinge being more in focus on the Canon. But another good example here, the foreground bokeh, right? Just creamier overall on the Sigma. But making it a little bit more apples to apples, we come back here and make the Sigma go to f2. So it's pretty much right on par when it comes to the f-stop compared to the Canon when they're wide open. It really starts to even this out. Although I'd say arguably, yeah, pretty much neck and neck there. I mean, the Canon is still winning when it comes into the corners, right? That's pretty clear. But in the center, it looks about on par with one another. Yeah, still beating it there though, on the corners. Jump to that back lens, take a quick peek. Yeah, that still looks like the Canon. It's a little better overall here. What's sharp and in focus. If we go all the way to the back, boom. The Sigma, pretty much neck and neck there as far as what's in focus. These, by the way, they're pretty far away and pretty small amount of detail for this distance. So you can tell that that's the Canon 50, but it's not very sharp and clear. And that's gonna be true for this. I think that's an adapter. Wait, no, that's the 40mm. Yeah, that's the EF 40mm lens, which actually looks pretty good boosted onto the M50. All right, but let's step it up to f4 on both lenses, as you can see here. And you're gonna start to see the Canon shed off some of those issues as it comes away from being wide open as well. And yeah, everything's pretty crystal clear here in the front. This looks great. Maybe a slight win on the Canon still. Let's go to the corners. Still a win for the Canon, look at that. Canon is still much sharper in the corners in the front here compared to the Sigma. Okay, let's jump on over to the subject in the back. Coming straight into the Canon. Yeah, still the Canon 22, beaten in clarity just a little bit, pretty subtle. You know, you're not gonna notice that being zoomed out of the picture. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, you can see that pretty clearly here with all these white letters on that black background. Canon is just a little bit more sharp when it comes to being in focus there. And let's zoom to the back. The Sigma is probably going to show the same thing on this box. It looks pretty on par. It's kind of hard to decipher between the two. Looks pretty good for both lenses. Still hard to read. These in the back though, right? A little bit better than when it was at f2 though, isn't it? Yeah, you can see that difference there. A little bit easier to read. Now let's really give these lenses a chance. We're going to f8 here on both lenses. And as you can see, this is going to give us a ton of clarity, crystal clear quality here. This is pretty much neck and neck from both of these lenses, which is the way it should be shooting at f8. All right, we're going to zip over to the corner. Ooh. Slight win still to the Canon. That's what it looks like to me. What do you think? Just when it comes down to those details, just a little bit sharper overall on the Canon, but just a teeny bit, teeny bit. Let's zip over to that back, 11-22, and zip right in there and take a look. That's pretty close. I mean, slightly the 22, I'd still say. Let's look over this. This is easy to tell in this lens for me. Yeah, it's just pretty much neck and neck going on right there, which is great. These lenses are both performing pretty well here at f8. Of course, being wide angle lenses, you're going to get that little bit of distortion going on still. And sure, let's take a look at the Sigma in the back there. Might as well see how that works. Boom. Yeah, both pretty much equally in focus there. Well, let's take a look. Can you read it? Macro 0.3. A little easier to read on the Canon. It's just a little bit bigger over there because of the field of view. Yeah, pretty much neck and neck there on that. Now, I did take another shot at f16 just to see, in fact, someone actually requested this, that I take some shots at f16. So I was like, why not? Throw it in for you real quick. Let's see what happens when you go to the other side of the aperture. Here we have, still pretty neck and neck, I'd say, on this. Let's go to the edge. Huh, this actually looks a little bit in favor for the Sigma lens. And then, pretty close on this one. Let's see if that holds true if we zoom to the 11 to 22 in the back here. Pretty neck and neck. I'm not really seeing a significant difference there. Yeah, pretty neck and neck there too. Okay, some low light photos here. Sigma on the left, Canon on the right, both wide open. And the focus was on the Abarth logo here. And if we look at that, you're gonna see it's pretty much the same when it comes to sharpness here in the low light setting. But one thing that I personally noticed, and this is true in vlogging shots as well as low light photography, I just like the colors coming from the Sigma lens much, much better. And also, once again, that bokeh is really making a huge difference in how good the background looks with how creamy and subtle that shift is compared to the Canon. You can kind of see that here, especially as it tries to mess around with the light. Or even despite the light, just the roofs themselves. You know, it's just a little bit better here on the Sigma lens overall. Even if I go to f2 and make it to apples, sorry, I was f16, f2. Pretty much apples to apples here on the f-stop. Still much better looking on the Sigma lens. And part of that too is just the subject matter itself looks better with a wider angle lens. And there's the 22, right, chopping the field of view a little early compared to the Sigma 16. All right, but let's go up to f8 on both lenses here. You're gonna see pretty much still pretty good in focus here, right on the Abarth logo. Difference in the depth of field, right? So the background's coming more in focus. But once again, you're just gonna see a little bit better performance coming from the Sigma lens overall. And check this out, that's interesting. More in focus in low light on the Sigma lens than on the Canon lens. With exactly the same setting. Let's take a look and see how this car looks. Yeah, more in focus there too. And you can see up close here, especially how more subtle, just better bokeh overall coming from the Sigma lens. Let's go to f16 on both lenses here. Okay, 22 f16, Sigma 16 f16. And let's take a look. Long exposure time here at 10 seconds due to that very small aperture opening at f16. But as you can see, much more in focus. I'm going to take a look back at this brick wall here. See if it's still a win for the Sigma. A lot more subtle, but yes, still a win for the Sigma here in low light. And if we go over here, yeah, more in focus still here as well. And honestly, as far as the photo is concerned, it continues to look better on the Sigma overall when it comes to colors, when it comes to clarity, and when it comes to any bokeh that's present. Now, there was also some other focus requests on doing some landscape, outdoor, bright lit shots as well. So we're going to do a couple of those. Here we have a nice variance in subject matter from close to far. And the first one, we're focusing right here on this fire hydrant, shooting at f2.8. And that's just because any faster than that on both lenses, and it was going to go beyond 1/4000th of a second necessity for exposure. So here we go on clarity. And this is a win for the Canon, which is what it should be considering our first image quality test going on there. And if we look at the background, as far as what's in focus, you can kind of see that the depth of field is similar here, as it should be. And everything looks pretty much the same, although I will continue to say that I just tend to like the colors a little bit better coming from the Sigma in comparison to the Canon 22. If we focus now on the fence, change it to back here, you're going to see the Canon is going to continue to be slightly more in focus, continue to win on sharpness here. And the background you're going to see is a little more out of focus on the Canon, a lot quicker, even by this first light post compared to the Sigma. And then last but not least, I focused all the way on the background. And let's see who won this one. Sigma for sure. Oh yeah, definitely the Sigma. And that makes perfect sense. We're gonna go to F8. Bom, ba, bom, 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 ba, bom. F8, except we're back to focusing right on the fire hydrant. All right, so at F8, it should pretty much be neck and neck. Load, load, load. Come on, there it is. Neck and pretty close, but I'm still seeing just slightly more clear here on the Canon 22. But the background, that's similar on the background too, as far as what's in focus. It's great. Let's go to focusing on the fence. Okay, ba-doom. Right on the fence here. Pretty much neck and neck there, and on the background, pretty close, except the Sigma's still a little bit more clear when it comes to the distance. And then when we focus on the distance itself, I bet you the Sigma's gonna win again there. Ah, pretty close. It's not bad coming from the Canon there. That's great. Such a small pancake lens too. Although I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a little bit more noise up here in the cloud area, and then just the colors continue to be better on the Sigma lens overall. I just like it better on the Sigma lens. I also shot at f/16, same test. Let's take a look here, f/16. Huh, yeah, and just like before, the Sigma wins when we switch over to the other side of the aperture. f/16 is a little sharper on the Sigma than it is on the Canon. Let's go to the fence. Take a look at that. Sigma wins on the fence as well. It's subtle, but the Sigma is definitely sharper at f/16 than the Canon lens. We got to take a look at shooting into a bright backdrop, right? So here we have both lenses starting off wide open. The area of focus was these branches right up here. And shooting wide open, we're going to see some issues for sure. That's expected. The question is, who's got it worse? Who's got it bad? Okay, so ghosting, purple color fringing, there's chromatic aberration everywhere. Let's go where it's brighter on the Canon here, and you're gonna see it just as bad through there. Just as bad everywhere, right? And if we go to the top of the photo, looks pretty bad for the Canon, doesn't it? Oh, let's go to the bottom of the photo. Ooh, looks pretty bad for the Sigma, doesn't it? This is virtually a tie, but that's impressive, you know, f1.4 wide open, you're gonna get some of those issues. I will say though, however, when it comes to the Sigma 30mm versus the Canon 32, that was one of the very impressive things about the 32mm from Canon, is that it really muted the chromatic aberration, and the Sigma does not. Okay, we're gonna leave f2 on the 22mm, we're gonna bring the Sigma lens to f2. And a little more apples to apples here, right? And let's see, so still got purple fringing here on the Sigma. So yeah, still pretty neck and neck. That's right smack dab in the middle of the photo. Still pretty miserable in the back or the top of the photo. Still pretty miserable in the bottom of the photo. So we're pretty much neck and neck here in this comparison so far. Let's go to f4. Let's go right to the top here. I want to see the worst of it. Okay, still a teeny bit coming from the Canon still. Although I'll say it's really been muted. You don't see a lot of that purple fringing anymore. It's looking still pretty neck and neck here on both these lenses. Although I'll say the Canon did a better job capturing this f4 shot than the Sigma did. Let's go to f8. Okay, I got a little bit of lens flaring there, but let's take a look and see. That's one thing the Canon's gonna get quite a bit of. We'll take a look at that right next real quick, is some lens flaring, but let's just finish this up at f8. So you notice as we come away from shooting wide open, they both alleviate their chromatic aberration relatively quickly, which is great. That's what they should do. Just keep in mind, if you're gonna shoot wide open into a bright backdrop, you're gonna run into some purple fringing, some ghosting on both of these lenses. All right, let's go 22 f16, 16mm at 16. Zip right into the middle here. And that's, you know, honestly, the Canon did a better job shooting into a bright backdrop, didn't it? Actually not a bad composition, I like the contrast. Focusing on the ghosting, they're both pretty noisy here. See that graininess? Both of them are kind of grainy. Pretty neck and neck when it comes to chromatic aberration throughout, it seems to me. When you're focusing on the ghosting and the color fringing, the purple color fringing, you're gonna see they're gone as a blaring huge issue from both of these lenses after f4. All right, let's take a look at lens flaring. Now when it comes to lens flaring, they both have quite a bit of it. Here's the Canon 22mm. You can see it's pretty much a ton. But also the Sigma lens has a ton. And the main difference there you can see is the star pattern is presented different. I kind of like the Sigmas better, but as far as lens flaring is concerned, it's pretty much the same amount of it. And it looks pretty much the same, just a different star pattern when shooting directly into something super bright like the sun. All right, there you go, a truly thorough comparison between the Sigma 16 and the Canon 22. And at the end of it all, I'm pretty impressed how the cheaper Canon lens really held its own against the Sigma. It's definitely the sharper lens in photography, except for maybe at f16 and the smaller aperture settings, but it truly held its own, and I can see why someone might choose the Canon lens over the Sigma when it comes to photography, especially if you're trying to be conscientious about having a compact setup. It just can't be beat when it comes down to that particular aspect of photography and the EF-M mount system. But I just like how the Sigma lens looks. You can kind of see that symbolically here in the closing shot as I'm using the 16mm lens to take my closing shot. I just love the colors. I love its field of view. I think it's a great vlogging lens. And if you're in a tripod shot, you don't care about the weight or the size. It's just a lens I think you need in your pack with the EF-M mount system. That just goes to show how valuable the Sigma Trio is coming out for the EF-M mount system finally. It's great to have more lens options. And of course, it doesn't devalue the Canon lens. It just depends what are you looking for out of your lens. If you can afford it, both of them really belong in your pack, as I can see why you might want to take the 22 with you on something that's maybe a longer travel trip where you don't want too many options. You want something lightweight. But I can also see why you might want to have the Sigma around on different projects just in case you need that wider field of view. Right? Just kind of like this. This shot looks better with the Sigma compared to the 22, in my opinion. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it all. Please let me know what you think of each lens down in the comments below. If you want to check them out for yourself, as always, I'll post links down in the description below. If you use those links to purchase your lenses and equipment, it does help out the channel at no cost to yourself, and I truly appreciate that if you're doing that, because it helps me make more content. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. Don't forget to subscribe for more, and like if you liked the video, and I'll see you guys next time on DVR.